So, ladies and gents, you might have seen the recently released Amazon Prime series 99.
Can Manchester United score? They always score.
In that documentary, former players from the treble winning season are interviewed about the highs and lows of that history-making season. Those interviews took place at the Manchester United training ground. But no, not from here. Carrington. Prior to moving here, in the year 2000, Manchester United trained at the Cliff. By the way, if you are to come to Carrington, you can't drive, obviously, straight to the training ground. The reason Fergie moved the team, especially the first team, over here was to have less access for the press, for fans and so on, so it could be a little bit more intimate, and prying eyes weren't going to overlook some of Alex Ferguson's tactics.
And these days, of course, you'd only have a limited number of players. It was maybe a squad of maybe 30 odd players or something like that. We've now got over 70. So it's far too small and it's old.
So over there in the distance, you've got the security and a barrier which will let people like this van through. You'll go all the way down the road over there, and it is up there on the left. But despite Cristiano Ronaldo recently bad-mouthing Carrington, it's set in such a beautiful, scenic surrounding, just fields and everything I think Alex Ferguson was after when he moved Manchester United away from the Cliff. Anyway guys, as beautiful as it is round here, let's leave Carrington and head to the Cliff. Let's go. Original dugout, and then Fergie's is the third in from the far side, isn't it?
See the bottom bits here where the changing rooms. That's the old gym.
So Alex Ferguson's...
That's Fergie's room, yeah, where the chair is. That's his desk there.
Ah, with the chair. So they've literally left it as like a relic to what?
Well, it's basically, that's that room, and then at the back
Yeah.
of it there's like a... It's got a bath.
Okay.
And the toilet, like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
ensuite.
Yeah.
It's the only room there with an ensuite.
And the one next to it, that one there's Samantha Busby's, or was.
I think they had the same.
And then over there is the old gym behind the new dugout. Is that right, with the shutter?
Yeah, the gym.
That's the gym.
The first team preparing to leave the Cliff training ground in Salford, which has been their base for more than 40 years. Sir Matt Busby first took the club there after the war. United legends have sweated blood at the training ground, which has been at the heart of the success for so long.
And there was a canteen in there as well, because I've seen...
You see the dartboard?
Yeah.
Canteen's on the other side.
Okay.
This is where they are.
My heart is broken, what can I say?
"7:30 in the morning. Alex Ferguson is one of the first to arrive at the Cliff, Manchester United's training ground. Tension is rising for the quarter-final against Monaco.
To quote Nicky Butt in the 99 documentary, the Cliff, a tiny building which looked like it hadn't been touched with paint or anything for about 50 years. Ladies and gents, behind me is the Cliff. Now today has been somewhat eventful, as here I stand in a Manchester United shirt, having been at the arch rivals for most of the afternoon. I did come here earlier on off the back of that trip to Carrington, and I walked straight in. The gate was open. The people there inside the Cliff were really friendly, but they pretty much forbid me from filming around the Cliff. You see, We've got a few photos, some of those on the screen right now, but I was there for so bloody long, reliving my childhood. Young Roy, of about 5 years old, came out inside me. I was in my element. So I was in there that long, I didn't actually get a chance to do any filming here. So here we are, off the back of the blue side of Manchester, clinching a 4th Premier League title. By the way, if you are new around here, I don't make this a regular thing. We are a neutral YouTube channel. We're not a Man United fan channel. We do cover every aspect of football, Bundesliga, Premier League, Championship and so on. We will be at the FA Cup final at Wembley on Saturday. But back to the cliff. Obviously, most of the cliff was filmed here. Most of the 99 documentary was filmed here. I was a little bit shocked to hear that scene, or those scenes with Beckham, those interviews with Beckham, actually were set up. Probably an inside scoop right there. You're probably not meant to know that. Those scenes with Beckham in the documentary were made to look like they were filmed here, but they were actually on a set. They did walk me into the little lobby area, which I wasn't allowed to film in, but it's on screen right now.
Early morning at United's Cliff training ground, and not a soul in sight.
Bex wasn't actually here the other day, but Coley, Butty, the Nevilles, they were here. And we did get access to where those interviews took place. I don't know why I've got my shades on, it's getting dark. But through these gates, which again were open earlier on, as a reminder, this was originally a rugby league ground until 1933 when they moved out. It wasn't until 1938 that Manchester United made this their training ground. They got the lease in 38, but they didn't actually buy this place until 1951. Now, it's quite hard to believe in 2024 that prior to training here at the Cliff, Manchester United trained on the Old Trafford pitch. How's it going, mate? All right? They trained on the Old Trafford bloody pitch, but they didn't want to do any damage to what was a complete mud bath. The pitch was getting knackered, so they moved here. Now again, fun fact, this place, the Cliff, as a reminder, had floodlighting before Old Trafford did. You see, back in the day, floodlighting was fairly new. And when they moved in here, they put floodlights here because the youth team would play here in the evenings. So obviously it was dark and they needed lighting. It wasn't until years later that Old Trafford had the privilege of floodlighting. Right guys, I've snuck through a bush behind me, so we've got to go steady. Now this isn't the pitch we were on earlier on. This isn't the official pitch of the Cliff. But the lovely people at the Cliff earlier on did tell me that if I went down the road a bit, there's a couple more pitches which United would use on a regular basis. Because I referenced some of the team photos, some of the individual player photos you'd have for like sticker books and stuff. I said, did that take place on this pitch? They showed me some old photos and they said, look, there's not that pavilion stand in the background. So I guess that photo was from here. I might be completely wrong, but you've got a couple more pictures here which back on to a river. And as we said earlier on in the video, the reason Fergie moved to Carrington was he wanted a little bit more privacy. You see, training sessions were fairly open to the public. You would have people waiting outside, as they still do a little bit, outside Carrington for autographs and so on. But fans are one thing, the press and opposing teams were obviously exploiting the openness of the Cliff. He found that people were keeping an eye on his tactics, his preparations for upcoming games. So that was his main reasoning. See, when Ronaldo does criticise Carrington, you need to remind yourselves that they've only been there just over 20 years, but still fairly new. As a reminder, despite the fact that the first team, the reserves and the academy now train at Carrington, young lads, those younger than the youth team, still train at the Cliff back there. Manchester United still own the Cliff. It's got that kind of unique Manchester United buildings look the same, don't they? They've got those kind of industrial looking exteriors with that unique Manchester United font. You've got an old pavilion behind me here. To quote Nicky Butt once again, he spoke about the cliff like this: the environment itself was real to Manchester. No airs and graces around Mancunian people. What he's trying to say is the cliff was no frills, as we saw earlier on. Now, although I couldn't get any pictures and videos of inside the buildings, they've deliberately been kept exactly as they were when Manchester United moved out in 2000. You see, the Daily Mail ran an article last year about how run down the cliff is. When in reality, let's be honest, news outlets use Manchester United to get eyeballs on their stories. Anything United related gets views. The cliff is deliberately kept that way. Why would they make those buildings, or maybe the one building, should I say, the one with the Manchester United branding on the front, that has been kept in a reasonable state, but the other one isn't used at all? Why would they change it when they moved out in 2000? It's an iconic building, and I love the fact that it has been left in its original state. As I mentioned, I probably shouldn't mention, I'll just say I might, wink wink, have been inside, and I might have seen Fergie's office. I might have seen his phone. I might have seen some videotapes which were there, the same videotapes which would have been there in the 90s and late 80s when he did some of his scouting long before, you know, the world as it is right now. They would look at potential players on videotape that were sent in the post, highlight packages and so on. All that took place at the cliff. So in defence of United, obviously I'm somewhat biased, but I think they should open it up to the public. I think they should offer tours of the place, because it's the same place Fergie set up the treble winning team. Sir Matt Busby would train the Busby Babes. It really is an iconic building, and I really do think it deserves a little bit more respect, which I think it will do off the back of the 99 documentary. Now, if we do quote that Daily Mail article, they titled it "How Manchester United Talent Factory and Beating Heartbeat Became a Crumbling and Neglected Relic. Falling to bits, it looks like a zombie movie set after being largely forgotten by the Glazers." Now, we know the Glazers have neglected so many parts of Manchester United, Old Trafford being probably the most prevalent, but I thoroughly disagree that it's become a crumbling relic. If you do see pictures on, is it Tumblr or Pixar or whatever those sites are, if you see old pictures, it basically looks exactly the same as it did back in the 80s and 90s and 70s and 60s and so on, when Georgie Best was there. Alright, again referencing the Cristiano Ronaldo interview a couple of years ago, Manchester United don't have a great track record with training grounds, but it does make you wonder, why doesn't the cliff, pitches close to the main cliff building, why don't they get more attention? Why don't younger fans learn more about United's history? I'm guilty of it myself. For years and years I've been coming to Old Trafford, but I've never thought, prior to the 99 documentary, to come here and have a little look round. It's an important part of United's legacy. And ladies and gents, I hope you've enjoyed this video where we've had a little walk down memory lane, shared some stories, but we've done a couple of quotes from Nicky Butt. We need to quote one of the first things said in the 99 documentary by Bex. Although we found out today, spoiler alert, he wasn't actually at the cliff. Let's just pretend he was, because he said the cliff was home. And it really was. If you think, players only play at Old Trafford at the home ground every other week, once a week, a couple of weeks on the bounce at most. But they're at the training ground day in and day out. Again, quoting the Treble documentary, Steve McLaren said off the back of winning the Treble, he thought he was going to have a little break. So he said to Fergie, "So when we coming back in, Alex?" He said, "Steve, get your ass in 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." He was shocked, but it just shows the workhorse that was Sir Alex Ferguson and those legendary managers before him. Sir Matt Busby probably again being the most perfect of examples. Again, if we do speak about the lack of privacy, you can see here you've got a tiny little fence, which behind there is a river, is some water. But you can imagine, again, let's just reiterate, this isn't the actual cliff training pitch, but they did use these for kind of warm-up matches and so on, youth matches and stuff like that. You can see why the press would get easy access. I think the moral of the story is, it does make me laugh when younger fans suggest that Old Trafford or Manchester United's facilities are subpar. Well, we know that as fans. We're not delusional. We know that money hasn't been put back into the club. But really, do teams need fancy facilities? Do they need to be treated like kings, like royalty? When if you think about it, the basic facilities the Cliff had to offer, legendary players like David Beckham, who, let's be honest, some might consider a bit of a diva. He wasn't a diva, Bex. I love Bex. But maybe if someone was to be accused of being a little bit, how do I put it, high maintenance, it might be Bex. Those sort of players were grounded at the Cliff. Players like Georgie Best, Eric Cantona, whose shirt I've got on at the moment. Legendary players like that weren't fussed about the basic facilities of the Cliff. They got on with it. Again, it was a factory for building success. So, maybe we need to step back a bit and think, are Manchester United failing at the moment because Carrington's run down, Old Trafford's run down? Or is it down to other things? For me, it was a real eye-opener today to really look back at the successful years at Manchester United and think about what made them successful. It wasn't the fancy facilities, was it? They were workhorses, they were real men, they were warriors. They went to war to win that treble. They went to war 10 years after the Munich disaster to win the European Cup. And ladies and gents, it's been an absolute honour making this video. If you'd be so kind to hit that like button, it tells YouTube that this was a decent video. I'll leave that one up to you. And I'll see you this Sunday at Wembley for the FA Cup final. Come on then, we've seen it all.